Hey, everybody, welcome into the 14, where we're breaking down every SEC football game from a betting perspective for week 2. And this game is between the Pitt Panthers and the Tennessee Volunteers. It's an early kickoff, a noon Eastern kickoff at Neyland Stadium. The game will be on ESPN on Saturday, September 11th. From a betting perspective, we've seen this game move in favor of Pitt. Pitt opened as a 1-point favorite, and they are now showing as a 3-point favorite on most books. And the over-under has moved up since it opened at 54.5. It is now at 56.5. Going to bring in our betting expert, Christopher Smith. What's your initial thoughts on this non-conference game at Neyland Stadium on Saturday?
Yeah, Nick, good to see you again. And I want you to put your ear up to the sky this weekend. I think you live in Tennessee, and you may be able to hear some moaning and wailing coming out of Knoxville after this one, but we'll see. We'll get into the analysis in a little while. We'll see. But Nick, why don't you first take us through Nick's news and notes and take us around the headlines that are surrounding these programs entering Saturday's kickoff?
Well, first, Christopher, over the last 15 years, when has there not been moaning coming out of East Tennessee? It seems an untenable situation is the norm there these days. But Josh Heupel did provide some hope for this program in week 1. They played a Thursday night game, so they've had some extra time to rest and think about what they did in a comfortable 38-6 win over Bowling Green. And you know, we can start there with the news and notes, just what we took away from that game. The Vols won that game big, but actually didn't cover. I mean, that game, that line pushed, it continually moved into their favor as we neared kickoff, and I think it closed at like 37, and so they only scored 38 themselves. But what we saw was a really impressive first couple of drives. They scored touchdowns on each of their first 2 possessions of the Heupel regime, and everybody was really excited, liked what they saw from new quarterback Joe Milton. And then things kind of sputtered out a little bit. They were moving at the expected Heupel pace, but it wasn't as easy. It didn't come as easy against a bad Bowling Green team, probably one of the worst teams in the MAC. So a little bit of a mixed bag from a 32-point win. I mean, I don't know, it would be hard to complain, right, in Tennessee's position to, you know, especially after you can think in recent seasons losing a game of that magnitude to like a Georgia State, say a few years back under Jeremy Pruitt. So I think they're happy to be 1-0, and there's reason to be excited in some parts of the game that happened in Knoxville on Thursday. One thing I would be worried about, though, if you're a Tennessee fan, is the status of your starting running back. Tyron Evans had a great debut for this season with 120 yards rushing in the win for the opener. But now a report's coming out of Knoxville from Jimmy Himes that he's actually considered doubtful for this game due to health reasons, per his sources. And so, you know, we can look at that a lot of different ways in 2021. I know there's been some whispers about COVID issues at several different universities, so we don't want to speculate on exactly what that is, but I mean, it could very easily be that type of a situation. So we're hoping the best for him. And even if he's not able to play this week, that hopefully he makes a pretty quick recovery and can continue to contribute to the Vols. He looked pretty good last Thursday. And the last thing I would bring up before we get into really analyzing the nitty-gritty of the betting side of this is just Pitt looked really good in a 51-7 win against UMass in week 1. Now, how much can you actually take away from a game against UMass, who is probably, if not the worst team in the FBS, pretty close to the worst. So, you know, we have a couple of teams that are 1-0 coming into this game that won comfortably in week 1, but we just don't know how much they actually proved based on the opponent they were playing. Is that the way you see it as we get into the gambling side of this, Christopher?
Well, first of all, UConn would like a word if you want to slot.
Okay, fine. I take it back.
They've already lost their coach. I don't know if you saw that last week, but basically their defensive coach got him in the huddle last week, UConn, and was like, all right, everybody put your hands in. And all of the players just walked off. They didn't even put their hands in. Hopefully Tennessee fans and players are not ready to give up that fast if they run into some adversity here against Pitt. But, you know, one of the sources that has been a source of sort of griping and disappointment for Tennessee has been around the quarterback position, right? And you look at all the players that they brought in at that position this season. I'm talking about Virginia Tech transfer Hendon Hooker, who played well at times last year in the ACC. I'm talking about sophomore Harrison Bailey, who Tennessee fans were calling for all last season. Put him in there, coach. But we all know Josh Heupel named Michigan transfer Joe Milton III the starting quarterback, and he may be 6'5", he may be 244 pounds, he may be able to run over somebody in the red zone. But I am honestly a little surprised that Josh Heupel sort of pinned himself into a corner already, coming out and sort of saying, first of all, he named him the starter pretty early in fall camp. Second of all, he basically has come out this week and given no indication whatsoever that Milton is on any kind of short leash, even with those other guys behind him. And like you mentioned, he executed the scripted plays at the beginning of the game very well. But on his career, including at Michigan, 55% completion rate. He's thrown just as many interceptions as he has touchdowns. I saw somebody that said, based on last week's game, if Tennessee needed a 30-yard pass, Milton threw it 30 yards. And if Milton needed a 40-yard pass, he threw it 40 yards. And if Milton needed a 30-yard pass, he also threw it 40 yards. And he's not accurate. He doesn't see receivers open. He holds the ball too long. Now, you may remember Pat Narduzzi, who was at Michigan State for a very long time as defensive coordinator. This is the type of quarterback that he and his defenses eat for breakfast. I don't think Milton will be the starter by the end of this year. What Pitt and Narduzzi defenses usually do is they stack the box and they bring all kinds of heat on the quarterback, and they just dare you to beat them one-on-one downfield. And I just don't think Milton is the guy that's going to do that. Now, you look at the other side of the ball, and as far as I last checked, Tennessee was still waiting on the NCAA to give them eligibility word on the 23-year-old JUCO transfer, Byron Young. Now, he's a defensive end, and all reports out of spring and fall practice was he was one of the standouts on this defense. So not having him could be somewhat of an issue. Now, Pitt only ran for 5.4 yards per carry against UMass, which you already trashed for everybody. We already know how bad they were. And Kenny Pickett has been at Pitt, seems like a million years, and their offensive line is average. So they're not exactly a scary offense, but Tennessee is not exactly a scary defense either. They're pretty decent on defense. And we talked last week about Josh Heupel, who ran the nation's fastest offense at UCF and is going to eventually try to do the same thing at Tennessee. But Mark Whipple, who is the UMass former head coach, speaking of UMass, is now the offensive coordinator at Pitt. And they surprisingly ranked 18th in plays per game last season. And Narduzzi did sort of quietly move to a much faster paced offense and a much more pass oriented offense. So both of these defenses, I think, will have some sort of edge, especially Pitt. But I'd be a little hesitant on the total simply because there's going to be a very high volume of snaps in this game. I mean, you may see 160 plus offensive plays in this game. So, Nick, why don't you tell us what you're thinking from a betting perspective and where you might put your money in this one?
Yeah, so I think what you just hit on last is maybe most important to me when we look at the total of this game. We know Heupel's going to play fast. And we're pretty sure that Whipple likes to play fast in terms of an offensive play calling from Pitt as well. So when you got teams that are churning possessions like that and a total of only 56 and a half, I hate that it's at half. I'd love to get it at 56, 55 and a half, where the 8 touchdowns is the magic number. But I still like the over. I think we can get there with that many plays as long as a couple of big plays are hit along the way by either side. In terms of betting this game, I kind of lean towards Tennessee as a home dog. And it's not so much that I think that the balls are particularly good right now. I'm not taking anything from that Bowling Green game, but I do think that there's a matter of pride on the standpoint of the people at Neyland Stadium and the atmosphere they're going to have trying to get this program back jump started. So I think you're going to see a raucous crowd behind them. And then also, I think that this is the type of game that Josh Heupel has to win. So I think, if you're looking at this program to get to 6 wins, right, you really sit down and look at their schedule. This is one of them that you have circled as a have to, right? And so any team that comes in knowing, I know coaches say that they don't look at it that way and it's one game at a time, one play at a time. But this is a game that Tennessee really needs to have, and they're at home. So give me them and give me a field goal. I'll take it.
I think Pitt would be the third best team in the SEC East today, right now. I think this game should be more like Pitt -7. I don't think Tennessee's offense has any shot in this game, especially with Milton at quarterback. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to get shut out, but I don't think they have a really great chance to do what they need to do to win unless there's just a completely blown coverage and Milton somehow doesn't throw a laser beam 10 yards past the receiver, if they're even able to have a receiver get open. But their only hope, I think, on offense is Pitt, stacking the box against the run, blitzing, and then trusting their corners one-on-one, and maybe there's a big mistake for an explosive play, and Milton somehow hits them. But I'm definitely taking Pitt -3. It would be nice to get it at 2.5 or less, but hopefully if you're betting this out there and you want to follow this, it's not even more than 3 by the time you're betting this line. I saw one place that's at 3.5 right now. And on the total, I'm taking the under 56.5 just for the purposes of this video and just to put it on the record for our show. But I personally would not advise at all to bet on the total of this game. We talked about the pace. There's going to be a ton of plays, and it's just not something that I would want to put myself through. I will say that unders hit about 65% in week 1, and there's some adjustment probably to be made as defenses last season had a big advantage with no actual practice time and a lot of Zoom meetings, a big disadvantage, I should say. And scoring was down almost 2 points per team in week 1 this year versus last season. So something to watch here early, but put me down for Pitt -3 and the under, and we'll see which one of us comes out on top. For Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for SEC 14. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, and we'll be breaking down every single SEC game all season from a betting standpoint. Hopefully one of us gets you to the window, and we'll see you next week.